Welcome back. It's been about a month since I've been down. There were various things going on in my life. I apologize for the delay. I know I try to keep things up here at the site, but we had the laptop here had some technical issues that I sent it out for, and I basically the screen cracked. So it's something that I would not have wanted to happen to it, but you learn the hard way. And if you ever need a screen repaired by Mac for your MacBook, I recommend irescue.com. I'm not trying to plug them, but it's a very good site. Anyway, okay, here we are. We're in our My Web Table View app. I'm going to run it just so that we can go back to that point to see where we left off. Basically, we could add a link, right? And then when we added the link, we would have both the site and the link name. I'm going to add one in here, a well-known site, being a chess player. And remember, here we had the special keyboard here for this field, which is the web keyboard, and the standard keyboard for the name of the site. We can click done, or just actually go into that again and just hit enter, and it'll kill the responder, and then hit save. Okay, and there you see it in alphabetical order they're placed. So now what would happen if you wanted to delete a site? That's one of the things. So the next few tutorials here, this one here for deleting a site, the following one for checking if one exists, which is one we did sort of before when we did the dwarves, and the third one is running the link to the web view. I like to go in this order: delete the link, run the link to the web view, and then we can do the one where you check it if we want to, because we have both the site and the link. So we wouldn't want to have two sites with the same link or two links with the same site. With SQLite, if we have declared any of these fields in SQLite to be unique, we will have an issue and an error will be flagged in the application. So keep that in mind. I'm not going to go any further into that. Okay, I want to take a step back here. I'm going to close the simulator. I want to look at, this is the get initial data to display. Originally what you see down here, do you recall this? I've added new code here. The original code was we created a web object string web name. In other words, we took the web data web object which was created, and actually that really would look like this. This is missing here. Since it's missing from that line, I'm going to just add that line in just for completeness. Web data, right? And this would have been web object. This is how it looked, equals, and then you would have had this in here down below. I'm just going to add this here. It's been, here we go. It's been, whoops, sorry. Copy. Here we go. Alright. Right. So, and then this of course would be ended in a semicolon, as all Xcode is. So you would have created the web data object. Alright. Then you would have accessed the string web name property of that object, and then you would have taken the value here, the name, and placed it in the property of that object. Same thing for the URL. You would have accessed the URL property, and you would have placed the URL value in that property. So you ask me, hey Art, why change this? It works. It does work. And then down here you would access the array and add the object, but you wouldn't add the object, you really would be adding the property of the object. So adding these things is fine, actually, and it works out fine. I want to come to the add link just to give you a little overview on how it worked. Remember, when we clicked over here in our add link, alright, or add site, however you wanted to call it, we called it add link. We created a web object, we initialized it with the primary key, and then we accessed each property and we added each one in there. Now, if you look at this visually, you're taking one object and accessing properties from it. And you can do this for pickers, for even table view. The downside of it over here is when it comes to deleting an object. You see, when you delete an object, you are deleting the object. The object is an ID type in Xcode. Alright? And when you delete it, you have to delete the object, not the property. If I go into my root view controller here, alright, and I'm just going to take this line out for just a moment. Okay. When I created my object here, if I type that in over here, let's just do that for a minute. Alright. To give you an example of how the other one would look. Right, web object, we'll call it, equals, and I'm going to just place that right here. Okay. If I do this, obviously it's telling me it's not used. When I go to delete this, or if I more correctly, when I use the previous code here, if I had used this code, this value here is no longer an object. It'll actually give you the name of the site. Okay? So I'm going to just give you an example of what I mean here. We're going to run this. Okay? And I am going to just have... I'm going to comment out everything except my nslog. Nslog is a way of, if you will, sending information to the user to what they call debug your platform, debug your app. All right, we all want to debug our app. Now, this is a delete method. It's the editing style method. All right, it's normally commented out. It says if editing style equals delete, then do this, which means if I do this in my table view, like that, run this code. Now if I hit this, notice what I get here. I don't get any value. I get some unusual object in memory. It's not a value. But if you would have done it, if you would have done your coding, and we could do it, and I encourage you to change the code. Just comment all of this out and let this go in here. Alright, add this in. What you're going to find is that this value here is actually the value of the object that we deleted. Oh, it's not running now. I think I shut it down. So that's the takeaway here. I'm going to go through this at the end of it, and it's this. It's that when you delete something, even when you add something, it's an object. Now, in our add statement, okay, we linked the web name, or the web name property and the URL properties, to each one of our text fields. And of course, we also link them in our viewer, or in the visual, which is here in our nib. Right? We did that. So we were able to get away with that. We were able to take one object and say, okay, and I could do this for, if I had, let's say, an address, and I had the address, the city, the state, the zip code. I could have all properties for those objects, or I'm sorry, those pieces of information, and I could call it the address object, and each one would have street, right, would be a property, and then of course city, and then of course state, and then of course zip code, and maybe even phone number. But that's one object, and that's what happens with this here. And we can insert it using one object and accessing the properties. But when we go to delete it, we have an inherent problem, and it is this. It is the fact that, remember, the information is not captured in one object. The information is captured in two arrays. So if I delete one, let's say, right, I would then have the issue of the other one would still be there. right? If I delete the site, the URL would still be there. So what do we do here? Okay, let's go back to the code, just run you through that. We create one web object, we allocate with primary key, we access the string name property, which is fine, and set it equal to the value, the first value here, okay, which is our name. And then the second one, we then add the object to the site array as an object. We're no longer doing it as a property. And then we release it. We do the same thing for our URL. And this has no impact whatsoever on the add function. Why? Well, in the add function here, okay, we access the object or create a web object from the web data class, and we say, okay, set the string web name and the URL equal to text URL, and then add this. And when we add this under the app delegate where it's located, let's take a quick look there. We run this link object add link, it goes to our web data class. So we're using the app delegate as the pipeline. When we come to that one, right, we now are saying insert the URL and the WS name and the URL in, which is here, okay, and we're going to bind to both of those, and we're binding to what? The two items we just set the fields equal to, right? So we can use this when we add the data, no problem, but deleting it becomes an inherent problem. So how do we fix it? Since we have two arrays, we have to delete the item from both arrays. But there's good news. We only have to delete the item once from SQLite. And here's our delete method just so you see it. And it's similar. We have a delete statement which we have to create in the beginning, right up here. Right? We need to have a statement whether we add, delete, or update. Okay. And we create our delete statement here. We're simply saying delete from table websites where the ID equals whatever we select. So whichever line we select, we delete it. Okay? And then we bind to that ID and we get rid of it. So it doesn't matter once we get rid of, let's say we select the one we just put in, the chess link. It's going to delete the entire record from SQLite. It's going to do it with the ID of what we select, which means the URL and the ID go. However, that doesn't mean that we get rid of it from the table, because what? Because what's governed by the table is governed by these arrays which fill the table. Remember, in our table, it's going to go back to that too, we had to change this as well. If you recall, we had one web object and we accessed the property to fill both the text label and the detail text label. But now we create two objects, we access each array, and we fill each one. And because they're at the same object at index, so example, if chess is number 3, right? It finds at location number 3 it finds chess, but it also at location number 3 finds www.chess.com. So, and that's the danger with it. When we had it with the original one, we accessed one location, we got both pieces of information, but here we have to access the same location in two different arrays. And this one here, you can play around with this too and look at how I did it in the previous tutorial and see the difference. I encourage you to copy that. But it's really simple. And then of course, right here, we access the URL, which I just mentioned, and of course we create this string here, and we take this URL and we add it as right here. It becomes our detailed text. And we wanted to do that. We could have just done it with the string URL alone, but we wanted to put these parentheses around it, as you see here, and that's what you get. Okay. Okay. So in closing, in closing, as far as what I've just talked about in this whole thing here. Now, other thing you'll see here too is when you delete something, whenever you delete something using Xcode, generally you don't have to access more than one object. So if I just had a listing of the sites, I would just create the one object, which is the site array that you see here. Hold on, this site array here, and I would get the object of that site array and I would just delete it here. But I have two objects here, and the question is why? Well, I'm going to show you something for a minute quickly of what would happen. Actually, I'm going to go over to the app delegate. The reason why I had to use both of these objects is because I need to remove them from each one from the array. I'm going to run this and delete the chess link and show you what happens. Now, look what happens here. I got rid of the chess site, but look, everything offsets itself now because I didn't get rid of the chess link, or I should say the URL. And it's still there. It's still there in memory. If I reload this, it'll be gone because it's gone from SQLite, but it's not gone from the app here. And so that's why I need both. I need both objects here because I have to access two arrays. And in order to delete each object from each array, I have to have two objects. I can't do it with properties. I can't create one object and then the URL property or the site property. Can't do it. So I'm going to then just quit here for a second. I'm going to place this in here, back to where it is. Alright, and I'm just going to go through this here quickly here. This is in, we're going to go here, delete. Remember, the delete code here for delete item is one piece of code. When I go to my app delegate here, I say, hey, let me go to the declaration section. Whoops, sorry. I say I want to delete link. I want to run the delete link here. I want to access this in my app delegate. I want to create a web data object, one of them, and I need another one. So I need to pass two pieces of information, which really you could have them as, you don't even have to have them as this kind. You could define them as site object and URL object if you want to. We could have done this. Okay, we'll just do it quickly here. Site object and the URL object. Of course, we have to then go in here. We'll save it over here, right? And I'm just going to backspace here, and there it is, right? To be more specific, and of course I have to change those objects in here because I'm accessing them. So this is site, right? Whoops, sorry. Put site array in. Give me site object. Come on. There it is below. And then, of course, to make it more sensible for you and to understand it. And then, of course, here, this has to be site. And this way you'll be able to really capture what's going on. So what am I saying here? I'm saying, okay, I need a site object and a URL object. I want to delete the site object using the delete item method in my web data in here, right? And it's not passing anything to this code. It's just going to run it. And it's going to run it based upon what, though? Because it is actually passing one thing, if you think about it. It's saying, I got whatever the object, the location will be, which is really what it is. Let's go back here for a moment. When I pass it, when I run this, right, web object 1 is what? It's my object at index. So it says look at that index point at 3, 4, or at whatever line you're selecting, and pass it here. Say find that object at that location and delete the item. So when I come to here, okay, it says delete the item, and then it says okay, bind to what? The ID of that item. I didn't have to necessarily pass. Well, I've always passed an object when I've done it with the delete statement. Let me go to another one here to show you how it looks with one object. And here we go. Let's go to this one here. The delete on this particular project I've been working on. minute. It's in the controller. I'm sorry, not in the controller. It's in the class. There we go. Here it is. Delete, right? Alright, and it's only delete category here. Now, if I go back to the controller here and I go to that same line of code, the editing style, I create a cat object, and it's still the object and index path row, and this is called remove cat, not delete cat, just a different name of a method, but it still points to the cat object. Okay, and again, if I had specified the property, if I tried to point to the property, I couldn't delete it, I'd get flagged with an error. So the takeaway here is that whenever you delete or add something, you have to access the object, which is the location of where it is, which is what we're doing, right? Hold on, right here. So for each object, we have a location we're passing. It happens to be the same location. And it would be convenient to do it, be able to pass it one location for both, but we won't access the object, we'll access the text of the object, or the property of it. Actually, would be more correct. So anyway, we look at both here, both objects here. We say find the delete link, which is the site and the URL. We go over here to the app delegate, sorry, and we pass the site object over here to the delete item method, which is found in our class, and it gets rid of the line or that record because it looks at the ID of that record. Alright, it binds to it, it looks at it, and it deletes that record. So when it gets rid of the site array, it also gets rid of the URL array in the entire piece of code. And then after we do that, we then delete each one from the array. Simple, pretty much straightforward. We're going to run this and show you how it works quickly. And whoops, come on. Here we go. Okay. And we're going to delete tests over here. Now notice, and when we do that, now notice everything stays in line. We don't change the order anymore. It's out of both the site and URL, or out of both of their arrays. Okay, and that's really how you delete something. It's much easier with one item, but it's the same process. And with that, what I'm going to do is, I'm running long on this right now. I'm going to follow up with another tutorial right away that goes over this whole concept of object and property and how we did this. I want to do that in an open office presentation. So this is deleting an object. We did it both from SQLite and from the arrays. The quick recap: the delete method is two separate arrays now. I'm sorry, not delete method, the get initial data method. You get initial data on display method is now two separate arrays. Well, it always was, but it's two separate objects. I apologize. Two separate objects that now fill each array. And we do that because now when we need to delete it, we can access each object, and it's one object, okay, for each one. And then we run the delete item only for the one, because it'll get rid of both. Anything. If you had 7 records in there, 7 pieces of information fields in one record, it'd get rid of all of them. So we don't have to delete one. We only have to delete one. Let's go over to the. Only have to delete one item, one object, using the delete item method. Everything else goes. Every other field goes, and then the arrays themselves, we then remove each item from the array. And that's it. So I'll see you next time, and I will post the follow-up to this one, which sums all of it up. Okay? Take care.